Welcome to Off Panel, Sketch.com's weekly podcast. This week's guest is the co-creator of Ben 10 and the writer of I Killed Giants, Four Eyes, and the upcoming Spider-Man Deadpool. It's Joe Kelly. Thanks for joining the show, Joe.
Thank you for having me.
So I wanted to start things out kind of broad, and I know you're a busy guy outside of comics, and you and the Man of Action crew have been, you've seen a lot of success with your work in animation, but I've always kind of wondered, what keeps you coming back to comics?
It's not the money, I'll tell you that.
Well, that's kind of what I figured.
Yeah, no, we all started in comics.
Mm-hmm.
That was really my first paid writing job ever.
Yeah.
And so, there's a sense of home in that industry, no matter what kind of face it takes and shifting tides and all that kind of stuff. But I just love it. And really universally, all four of us love the medium. Like your ability to control the story, to really articulate whatever it is that's in your mind in a very economical way. You're not jumping through 75 crew people and 450 board artists or something like that. It's you. It's your artist. Maybe it's a slightly expanded art team and hopefully an editor who gets you and gets what you're trying to do and brings the best work out of you. Mm-hmm. And then you've got a really cool physical thing you created. I still love it, and I still think in those terms. I can't imagine not thinking in those terms. It's kind of funny where there will be some projects where I'll kind of start writing them as a script and a screenplay and a comic script and figure out which one it is. Sometimes also some things can only be comics, which is nice. It's kind of cool when you find those projects. Across the board, the guys at Man of Action, we know if something's commercial or not, but first and foremost, it's always, if we're going to make a comic, will this be a fun comic? Is it a satisfying comic? There's so many people out there where and fans smell it a mile away. This is a test balloon to see if you would like this as a movie.
Yeah, it's like expanded storyboards, basically.
Yes, and we hate that stuff. And so I know for me, especially kind of where I am in my career and the kind of stuff that I've done, if I'm going to do something original, it's usually, especially, the things that are kind of like in my computer that hopefully will get finished and you'll get to see someday. It is a little bit more experimental, and it's a lot more of the medium, really, really focused on, you couldn't do this as a film. You couldn't do this as a TV series. It is a comic. Mm-hmm. And, we go to the store. I can't say I go every Wednesday, but I was just out in L.A., and we happened to be there early. And I've never been to a comic store on a Wednesday as it opened.
Oh, yeah.
And, there was a line. I was so blown away. I was like, this is awesome. Energy of being in the store for people who were like gunning to get their Wednesday fix was really cool. And there's just so much inspiring work going on. So it was a nice reminder of like, why we do this kind of stuff. And the talent pool is ridiculous. it's just, there's such good stuff out there. And, as crazy as Comic-Cons have gotten and as big as they've gotten and more media-centric as opposed to comic-centric, when you find those gems, they become a part of you, I think. Like, it's different. It's a different experience. Like, I used to talk a lot about the communal experience of being in a movie theater is one kind of thing. It's important. It's actually a societal sort of need, which is very cool. It's sort of sad that people are going to less movies and watching more of them at home. Mm-hmm. But the comic, because it's tactile and because it's you in a room reading this physical thing, you form a different relationship with that material, and I love that. I really do.
Yeah, well, and I'm sure you've seen that, firsthand with I have to imagine I'm sure people are pretty gaga for Deadpool and everything, but I Killed Giants, I have to imagine people really, I know it was a personal story for you, but I have to imagine a lot of people made some deep personal connections to that story in particular.
Yeah, that's been a very unique and special privilege, really. And I don't say that lightly with I Kill Giants, because, I know where I wrote it from. And like you said, it was personal, and it was an extrapolation of things that were going on in my life. And the way it came out and how it came out also timed with other, with the sort of continued extension of my personal life story. But then to have people show up continually, I mean, its book's been out for a bunch of years now. I found this book at a really tough time. Somebody in my family was dying. People getting tattoos. Like, it's mind blowing. I mean, it's amazing. And I'm a person who's quick to emote. So when I'm at a convention, if somebody starts telling me their story, and and you just try and not to make eye contact because you're both going to start crying. It's sort of that experience. A lot, very often with Giants, and it's wonderful. I mean, it's really special, and it's one of those projects that they're not all going to be that, and with as large a number of people as have come up for Giants, but you do, I don't know, at least for me, even if it's a comedy thing or a weird, darker thing, there's somebody gets it, and to know that you made that connection. And because of comics is one of the things that's kind of great about our industry. We have such a tight connection of fans. Like, we've always been accessible to fans. It's not like the internet changed that or anything like that. There's always been comic conventions. You could always meet somebody. Then when the internet started, I mean, I used to do AOL chats and stuff. I mean, that's how far back my fan connection goes. And so you find out, like, okay, well, Engine Head didn't really sell that many copies, and DC cut us off at the knee with the last couple of issues. But then somebody comes up and says, that was my favorite book. I love Ted McKeever, and I'm so glad you experimented. And you go, oh, yay, somebody's actually paying attention. You get that immediate feedback, and for better or for worse. Obviously, you gotta take the good with the bad. But when it's good, it really is that beautiful connection you hope to get with an audience. And Giants has definitely availed me that. It's really been very special, which has been, I can't be grateful enough. I mean, it was really, it's very, very cool.
I think it's funny that you mentioned some of the random books you've done throughout your career where people have these strong personal connections. I did a podcast with Scotty Young about a month and a half ago or so.
Oh, sure. Uh-huh.
And we ended up talking for 5 or 10 minutes about steampunk because I read that when I was I think I was 14 or something like that. And I'm gonna be totally honest, Joe. I at the time I had basically no idea what was going on, but there was a part of me that just loved it. And part of it was your writing, part of it was Chris's art, but it was just I think it came down to the fact I'd never seen anything like it. And anyways, and it was funny because I brought that up randomly to Scotty, and he's like, that's my favorite comic of all time. and so we ended up talking about it for 10 minutes, but it was funny because he was talking about, he's how he talked to you about some of the ideas he had about where the story goes from there. And it's funny though, because I guess you can do that with anything. And beforehand, before recording, we were talking about Star Wars and Harry Potter and stuff. But it is interesting how fans can read something like steampunk and they can think about what happens next, and they can theorize and build up their own story, even if the story itself doesn't go on. And I don't know. I think that's something. Maybe it's not completely unique to comics, but it's something that comics definitely instills, because it feels like it's I don't know. I've always heard that the writers and artists make the story, but readers in their interpretation kind of make the story in their own way, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, sure. I mean, the quote, I've only been introduced to it in the last year, so I know it's an old quote, and I don't know who said it, but it's just that the reader or the audience is the final collaborator.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
And it's a great way to look at it. And I don't write for the audience. I mean, it depends on a project. Obviously, something like Ben 10, I have to know who I'm writing for. Mm-hmm. But I still write to amuse myself. Right. I'm the first person that I'm trying to satisfy in that equation. And then you just hope that you find the like-minded individuals that sort of that finish the book for you. That become the final destination. Because we don't do these things to sit in a drawer.
Right.
They're meant to be enjoyed by people. So you hope that somebody's out there, and experience is definitely borne out for me that even the whatever project, I mean, somebody likes it, and which is, it's not like an ego thing, because sometimes it's literally 5 people, but that's okay. Like, I made something that 5 people like. That's all right. And then you make like Ben 10, and you're like, okay, 187 countries like that. That's okay too. And they sort of occupy obviously a different sense of scale, but emotionally it's kind of the same space, and that's good ammunition to help somebody keep creating. Mm-hmm. 'Cause a lot of times, especially when you talk to younger artists that haven't had that yet, that experience, they feel like they're whistling in the wind. They just don't know, who's this for? What am I really doing? They're just going totally on faith. And you kind of have to have a little bit of that to go, yeah, the book will find somebody.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I think it's just like, so you had mentioned Ben 10 and how it's like in 187 countries. Like, I never, I don't talk about my podcasts a lot, or like my work in general on my comic site with like coworkers and family and friends, just because like they don't have like overlapping interests that much. and so, but I mentioned I was like, my coworker asked me what I was doing this weekend, and I was like, oh yeah, I'm talking to this writer who's done a bunch of comics, and he also created a TV show called or an animated series called Ben 10. And she like paused, and she was like, my kids love Ben 10. And like, I was like, oh God. And she was like, they would be so excited to find out. Like, and she's like, can I send you questions? I'm like, I don't know.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. But so one thing I really like about comics is the fact, like, have you ever heard of the Blacklist? Not like the James Spader show, but like the list of scripts that are like the best ones that are not made.
Sure.
Like, the thing about those is, like, sometimes those scripts never get made, even though they're fantastic. But the cool thing for, somebody like you is, like, if you have a script, all you need to do is find an artist and you can make it. And like, I think that's one of the magical things about comics is, if there really is, if there's a will, there's a way, really.
I agree 100%. I mean, and especially in the digital age, I mean, the gatekeepers don't exist. And it doesn't guarantee that your work will be seen by a ton of people, but there are no boundaries to trying to reach that audience, where before it was, okay, my artist and I have to try to get this book together, and we have to try to figure out how to get it to a printer or to get it to a publisher, and gatekeeper. And they don't exist anymore.
Right.
If you're willing to sort of work in the trenches and you're comfortable with what you're going to get. And I don't know. I've always been that way. Even when we worked on Superman, like Jeff Loeb, who is obviously a dear friend, I've known him for a very long time. He's very business savvy, so he would always pay, like, he'd know what the sales were and that kind of stuff. And I'd be like, just please don't tell me what the sales. Like, I can't. If I start thinking in that way, it'll drive me nuts, because then I'll worry and all that kind of stuff. And the only time I ever go on like boards about, like, once in a while I'll go on a board if something came out that I felt really passionate. I just want to make sure people kind of got it. Mm-hmm. But I try to avoid a lot of that stuff and stay a little bit insulated, because for me it's more about just, can I get it done and can I get it out to you? Mm-hmm. And we've been lucky enough working with Image to know that, like, if we create something, it has a home,
right?
Which is great. I mean, that's a luxury that most people don't have. But if you're just starting out and you're brand new at all this stuff, you literally have the internet, and if you can just start to get eyeballs, and that's the biggest challenge, almost more than doing the work itself. But doing the work is, of course, the most important part.
Right.
But finding the people who will come to it, it's just you start telling your friends, and you hope that they tell 2 friends, and you find the right person, and then 100 people, 200 people. It builds slowly, and we tell people all the time, like, it's a marathon, it's not a sprint. And once, I don't know, one of the things, unless you have a very time, of the time art style, it's like a book. I mean, these things can live forever. So you may not see the immediate payoff, but you wait a couple of months, a couple of years. I mean, Giants is a pretty good example. I mean, it took a while for that book to find its audience to the point where it's now an evergreen book. Like, we'll always publish that book, and people continue to discover it every year, which is amazing to me. It's not like, the fuel is still in the engine. I mean, people are they hear about it. Oh, what is this thing? I heard it was pretty good. They pick it up. They tell two friends, and it's slow growth, but it's a constant growth.
Right.
And that's sort of that's the beauty of the age that we live in. The thing can exist out there forever digitally, and that's incredible. And then if you get enough people, or you do a Kickstarter or whatever, and you want to make a book, that's cool. You have the physical representation of that work. But yeah, it's an exciting time for that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, like, one of my favorite examples for what you're talking about is, Jeff Smith's Bone. I mean, it started, he was self-publishing it, and and 23 years later, it sold like millions and millions of copies around the world, and it's incredible. And like a recent example, like it's not a huge success or anything, but this is a great example of what you can do today. There's this one book that I recently read that was from 10 Speed Press. It was called Deep Dark Fears.
Okay.
And it's by this guy named Fran Kraus, and he went on Tumblr and he basically started drawing comics of his fears, like just these like quick 4-panel comics. And then people started submitting fears, and he started drawing them too. And like they're all like they're not like scary or anything. They're kind of like creepy, comedic almost. Okay. And it's just kind of interesting because he found over the process of making it that it's staggering how many people share these like fears that they for their entire life thought was odd. And anyways, and so like it got published into a book, and it's a great book, and it's just kind of cool because like I highly doubt he started it thinking like this is going to become a sensation, this is my plan to take over the world, but it found an audience that connected with it, and like that's something that can happen today.
Yeah, that really is the key. I mean, knowing that the audience is out there, and the thing I think we don't keep in mind enough is that they are looking for you. Right. Like issues with search engines aside, like that they sort of cater to you. But if I'm a reader and I'm interested in a certain type of story, I can now go look for it, and I don't have to just rely on, I hope my comic book shop picked it up, or I hope I didn't miss a page in previews and I read every single page in previews to see if there was that diamond in the rough that I really want. Yeah. No pun intended there. But, you can find that stuff. So they're looking for you and you're looking for them. And this age allows you to find each other. Mm-hmm. And that's a great feeling. I mean, it really is. And we haven't done too much really in the digital realm, just because we've got kind of our system, but it's something I'd like to experiment with more for sure. And it's just trying to figure out the right way to do it. I mean, I love what Brian and Marcos did with Private Eye. Yeah, that was an incredible experiment, and there's so many opportunities. But if you're new, boy, is it a great time. Yeah. It's the equivalent in some ways of this idea that camera equipment has become so cheap, and After Effects and all that sort of stuff that if you're willing to dedicate the time for a microscopic fraction of a Hollywood budget, you can make a pretty damn good looking film. Mm-hmm. It's now you have if you've put in the time and you've made your comics, you don't need $1 million distribution company and 2,000 comic shops or whatever to find the audience. You just have to press a button and put it up and try to find the people, so so it's great. I mean, I think that's exciting, and it's a nice way to open the field to voices that you wouldn't necessarily get, and comics that would just be sort of, maybe you might find them at a show, but as shows change and evolve, they're harder and harder to find.
Yeah. It's funny you brought up, kind of how like it's easier to do like a DIY film these days as well. Because I was going to ask you if you'd have you seen? I know that I'm sure you know who's directing I Kill Giants, Anders Walter. Did you ever see Helium?
Yeah, of course.
Oh man, it's fantastic. I was curious if were you involved with the process of developing the adaptation at all, or was that just I mean that film is so perfect for I Kill Giants. I feel like he's gonna really get that story.
Yeah, Anders is incredible. One of the nice things about putting out your own work. And again, all the guys in Man of Action are in kind of unique position because we were so lucky with Ben 10 and it sort of helped solidify us in a certain way. You control your own rights, so you make whatever decisions you want to make. And from the beginning, I was very lucky with I Kill Giants to meet people to whom I could directly say, I will be the only person who ever writes on this.
Mm-hmm.
I will never, ever take any position where I'm not involved in this project. So if that's a problem, thank you, but no thank you.
Right.
And I was able to say that to Chris Columbus. I was able to, I was able to say it to everybody, and people really were cool and got it.
Mm-hmm.
So the team that we have, including Anders, everybody knows that that's the spirit that we've been working on. I mean, so much of what we did for, because obviously these things take a long time. I've worked with some of these people for years on a handshake. There's no deals in place or anything.
Mm-hmm.
So because, I mean, then when things became real, then you work all that stuff out. But I like them. I trust them. We're able to work. So, yeah, I adapted the screenplay. I was introduced to Anders' work through the folks that I was working with. And mm-hmm. Helium, like you said, the fit was just unbelievable. And then 9 Meter, I don't know if you ever saw his previous one.
I haven't.
Yeah, so 9 Meter, I think was, I don't remember if it was nominated also for an Oscar or it was in contention for a nomination, but it was up there. Mm-hmm. So the guy, I'm pretty sure he was twice nominated. I have to double check. But 9 Meter is another show that has, it's a beautiful short film. Similar thematics in terms of sort of the drive of a person to deal with emotional trauma at home, mm-hmm. While a loved one is going through something challenging. And it's a really cool story. And, so you watch the two of these things, and you're like, all right, this is the guy. Like, there's no question.
Yeah.
And his vision is very clear on films where he had a little bit of money. And then you go, well, if you gave this guy some real money and the tools, he has the, everybody likes to put things in a box, but that early Amblin feel where it's going to be a big classic fun movie, mm-hmm. like it's going to have a really big feel, even though the heart of the story is so personal and so punch you in the gut. It doesn't have to be a small film.
Yeah.
And Anders can, no question, pull that off. It's going to be, it's really going to be something special. And and I love him to death. He's just such a nice guy. He just had his second child, as a matter of fact.
Oh, well,
just the other day.
Congratulations to him. I mean, as soon as I saw Helium, and I found out that he was directing I Kill Giants, I was like, all right. Yeah. That makes sense. That makes sense. But so you talked about how, I mean, obviously it's a personal story, but and you've done a lot. You've seen your work on the screen before, but I'm curious, is it a little surreal for that project to be becoming a film, or are you experienced enough to be able to separate yourself from that?
No, it's always surreal.
Yeah.
I think it's, and I hope I never hit the day where it's just sort of taken as,
yeah. That's old hat. I've done that before.
Yeah, exactly. There are many days where I feel like everybody does. You're at a job or you're caught in a grind or whatever, and I just work very hard. And luckily, my partners are very good at shaking me out of it and going, "You do realize you're getting to insert cool project here." I'm not busting my back on the side of the road pouring tar or something. I mean, it's like we get to work in cartoons. We get to make cool stuff for kids. We get to, develop films and do TV shows. Like it's a great life. And as a group collectively, like every time we hit a new level or try something different or meet another person, you just get more excited. I get more excited. There are plenty more mountains for us to climb, and each project is its own unique thing. I mean, it's kind of amazing. The Giants process has taken a long time. I mean, nobody ever really knows how the sausage gets made. Everything's like the overnight success. It took 10 years. Mm-hmm. But even making the comic, I had written that script, and it took years before I found Ken.
Yeah.
And there were other artists that I had spoken to who either were kind of interested, but I couldn't pay them, or they were half interested, but they got pulled away to something else. There were, no hard feelings anywhere. It just didn't work out with people. So that thing was sitting in a drawer for a long time before it was even drawn.
Yeah.
And then it comes out, and then you have a period of, oh wow, this is kind of cool. Somebody's interested in it. It's really neat. So this one, Giants especially though, because it's so close to my heart, the process has been exhilarating. Like every little step is a new. But I also am very good at going, okay, well, that happened, and that's really cool. Now just go look at all the other things you have to do, because it's not really in your hands. Right. There's a machine in place that has to, even though we're an independent production, there's a machine that has to go do its job. And I'm not a person who owns a bank, so I don't know how those things work. And I'm just happy to be the creative guy. And I've been lucky enough to get to do that. So it's, it doesn't become old hat. It definitely does not.
That's good to hear. Well, you may not own a bank, but and you've kind of talked about this already, but because of your success with like Ben 10 and various projects in animation, do you feel like that's allowed you to be more selective with the projects you take in comics?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's allowed us to, me personally, to finance books, in such a way that, I couldn't do necessarily, at the mainstream companies, if they didn't want to do the type of book I want, like a book like Bad Dog,
Right.
Like Bad Dog is such a weirdo book, which I love, and we're still working on, even though it's a slow process. Diego has the painted style, nobody knew him, all that kind of stuff, but I can work with him at my own pace and on my own terms, and on his pace and his terms. That's directly due to the success of Man of Action,
Mm-hmm.
So that does allows us as a group to take more creative risks. And then with comics, it's also been kind of nice to, though I certainly wish my output was higher. I'm always beating myself up of, oh, I should be writing more books, and I should be doing more, and finishing the things that I started. But they do eventually come out. Like I said, it's a marathon, not a sprint. But working in the things that I'm specifically interested, then when I go back to something like Spidey Deadpool, and it's a mainstream book, I don't know, I feel like it can bring something different to it, because I haven't been in that pool now for a couple of years.
Right.
And so it's nice to come back to it with sort of fresh perspective and different kind of vibe. And I'm obviously not the same writer that I was when I worked on Deadpool. I'm not even the same writer that I was when I was on Spidey. So I think, and I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, well, that was actually one of the things I was curious about, because before this, I actually read an issue. I read Deadpool back when it was coming out, back in the day. And I mean, it's been almost, since you started, it's been almost 20 years since you started Deadpool. And that was one of the things I was curious about, is like, has that time away kind of changed the way you approach the character, or do you feel like, to kind of stay true to the character, you kind of have to stay in line with how you wrote him before?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, because he's somebody else's toy, I actually have to go. I have this weird split personality with him. Like I know what I think Deadpool is.
Yeah,
and it's not much farther. It's not very far away from what I did, even with the time that's passed. I feel like there are certain elements of that character that are part of the DNA that you don't want to mess with, But then that being said, it has been 18, 17, however many years since I last wrote that character, and lots happened and a lot of cool stuff's happened. And so he's where he is now. And so as somebody coming on into the universe now, I have to look at what's going on and honor that work too.
Right.
So it's trying to find a happy place between those two brains that I don't feel like because I don't have the right to go in and go, oh, this is how it's supposed to be.
Yeah, he's not married anymore. He's doing this. Yeah.
Exactly. That's not it's not my style, but B, it's not my job.
Right.
My job is to look at what everybody's doing, and like I said, there's very cool stuff going on. Uh, I really like what Jerry does. I mean, it's just the character's cool, the world is interesting, and then take my, okay, in my perfect world, or if I had never stopped writing Deadpool, or if I had just hit the pause button and picked up again, finding the place to marry those two, and that's fun, and it's the same with Spider-Man too. I mean, really, I think there's a lot of stuff that's changing, and that changes over the course of this event that's ending and coming out into the new books. And you have to roll with those punches. So it's but it makes for good creative challenges. I mean, we all I always go to the we, just because as a group, Man of Action, we work on so many projects. It's nice to have restraints, because you go, okay, you can't go here and you can't go here. What can I build with the tools that I'm left with? And those are good challenges, because sometimes when everything is too open, it's easy to, get lost in the weeds. So knowing that there's a certain structure to these characters, even if it's not the structure I would have picked, is fun.
Yeah.
And Spider-Man is a character I loved my entire life. I still love him. He's my absolute favorite. And then Deadpool is, cornerstone of my career. And that was a really formative time for me as a writer. So it's kind of the perfect confluence of characters. If I had to do a project, a mainstream project, this was it. I mean, when Nick Lowe called me up about it, and he's like, I got something for you and you can't say no. And I was like, all right, yeah, go on. And he's like, all right, Spidey, Deadpool, and Ed McGuinness. And I was like, oh, wow, that's actually kind of cool. I mean, I was really prepared to thanks, but no thanks. Because I had been asked periodically if I wanted to do stuff. And I was either, too busy, or just didn't know if I should go back or whatever. And I don't feel like this is a going back, which is kind of cool, because everybody's got a new status quo, and there's new stuff going on, and it is the two of them together. So it's a two-fisted action. It's very cool. It's a different beast.
Yeah. Well, and those two characters have played against each other quite a bit in their history, but I do think it's interesting how. I mean, obviously, you've done lots of big stuff in your career, but you are so well known for Deadpool.
Yeah,
I've talked to people who are like, I'm like, we talk about Deadpool, and they're like, I really just like Joe Kelly's Deadpool, and I'm just like, wow, that's funny. It's interesting that so far past the formative years of your career, that's still somebody you're really known for. But I guess as somebody who is known as the man of Deadpool. To you, who is Deadpool? And here's the thing that's always kind of been perplexing to me, because it really is the quality of the character is always dependent on who's working on it. That's the same thing for every character, but
sure.
It really feels that way for Deadpool for me. But what do you think it is that has made him? He's insanely popular these days. What do you think it is that made him so popular?
It's so it's so weird. It's they're almost two different. I feel like it's two different things. Who is Deadpool and why is he so popular?
Yeah.
They're kind of different, because the popularity, I wouldn't say it's baffling. I think it's been a very interesting sort of use of that character outside of comics.
Absolutely.
So the fact that, for example, that big omnibus that we have of all my stuff, which is really cool. That was I literally got a call hey, guess what? We're doing an omnibus. I had no idea it was coming out later. When I bring those to conventions, I sell the majority of them to, I would say, 10 to 15-year-olds.
Interesting.
And it's $100 book, right? So they're begging their parents for this book. It's not fans who remember it from 20 years ago and want the omnibus. It's their kids. And I know that those kids are not reading all the comics that are out there. They just aren't. Mm-hmm. So they saw him in video games. They saw him as narrating Lego games. They saw him when we put him in Ultimate Spider-Man. he's just appeared in different manifestations, even and even the ill-fated his ill-fated time in Wolverine.
Yeah.
I think that those manifestations have really helped make him popular, sort of in the mainstream. Then taking a step back, he was so fun to play with within the comics because, and this really came after my run. Once he started the heavy fourth wall breaking and really, people amping up the comedy in different ways and more experimental ways. As a writer, it would be a fun character to play with. So then he started showing up everywhere. And then there was, we would call it the Wolverine effect. I mean, then it just became, if you put him on a cover, it sold.
Right.
Then there was definitely a financial reason for his popularity. So all these things kind of work together to put him in the position where he is now. And then obviously the movie, once that trailer came out, it's kind of like all bets are off.
Yeah.
But then the character, because when I wrote that book, I've said this many, many times, I was hired, Idelson hired me and said, nobody thinks this book is going to last more than 6 issues. So don't get too excited.
That's always inspiring to start with.
Yeah. But it was fun. He wasn't being dour.
No, I know.
Nobody had any faith in the character, and they just sort of felt like. So we said, well, let's just do whatever we want, And the first pitch of that series actually was really, really crazy. It was at the same time as Heroes Reborn.
Yeah.
For a while, we wanted the first arc to be that Deadpool had stolen that ball universe. Didn't know he had it, and was constantly running around just like bouncing it off.
Oh my god, that is amazing!
Entire Marvel U, and we had him fighting, Ego the Living Planet and Obnoxio the Clown. Like, we just wanted to take all the weirdest stuff of the Marvel universe and make that Deadpool's world. And rightfully, a lot of that stuff got thrown out, which was good, and kind of forced us to go back and really analyze him as a character. And the stuff that I really gravitated towards was that it was a guy who actually wanted to do good, but was constitutionally incapable of doing so.
Right.
And on those rare occasions when he would do the right thing, the universe would kick him in the balls. So he could not win. And that was always the driving thing with him. So to watch him push the boulder up the hill and try really hard and be funny while he was doing it, and then just have that boulder crush him every single time, like that for me is Deadpool.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing that I think kind of gets underrated about, the successful runs on the character, but also, more specifically on yours, is like, it's a funny book. I thought it was hilarious, and Ed's art is fantastic, but the thing that I think other Deadpool stories had missed before then is it didn't really make him a person. Mm-hmm. And I feel like you kind of gave him personhood. Like you gave him like he wasn't just like this ultra violent laugh machine. He had like more of an identity that made him feel, I don't know, I don't want to say relatable, but like you could be empathic with him.
Right. Well, I definitely. Well, thank you. I mean, I also had more room. I mean, I got to, because we made it more than 4 issues, or more than 6 issues. I mean, the prior, I'm trying to think of the 2 miniseries. I think one was maybe 4 issues and one might have been 6.
Yeah.
And obviously he was popping up in other books, certainly. But like one of the things that I distinctly remember, like it really stood out, and I'm pretty sure I'll beat myself up if I misattribute this, but I think it was in Wade's arc. But when his mask got yanked off and he freaked out in the middle of a fight, and he was yelling, "Give me my face back!"
Right.
And that really struck a chord with me about how vulnerable this character could be. Mm-hmm. And so the seeds were always there. I think I just cultivated them in a certain way that felt right for me. And I mean, with any of these characters, I always, even Superman, it doesn't matter. If I can't find my humanity entry point or the thing that I'm going to relate to in that character, I'm dead in the water, because then it's just plot, you can only have so many death rays and buildings, getting blown up and bad guys or whatever. It's really got to be about those characters. And so for Deadpool, finding, in that first arc where we were hoping we were going to make it to 12, this idea that he would save the universe and then just get crapped on for it.
Yeah.
That was always that was the plan from day one. And so to get to tell that story and to know that was where we were headed, and his relationship with Al and all the kind of craziness that that we were able to do. Those are all things that I could relate to in weird ways, even the dark parts of him. Mm-hmm. And if I don't have that, I'm just like, what I find it hard to write. Like, the easiest parts of a superhero story are like the fights.
Yeah.
And that is the hardest stuff for me to do, because I find it boring.
Right.
I'd really rather know, like, oh, okay, am I pushing this character forward, or am I putting them in uncomfortable situations? And, I like torturing them. Like,
yeah.
That's what makes it fun. And Deadpool especially, you could just torture the hell out of that guy. But he always comes back. And even when he comes back poorly, like when you finally see what happens when he throws Al in the box, like that's painful to write, actually, but I remember writing it and being like, wow, well, this is pretty dark, but that it feels right. It feels like the character, and I get why he's that. I get why he's so angry and has so much self-hatred that then he'll allow himself to behave poorly, even though he knows what he's doing is wrong.
Just to bring back the surreal nature of seeing your creation on a screen and everything. Blind Al is a character I never expected to see in a movie.
Yeah. No, I'm very excited. I can't wait to see her, and to really see. I mean, just even seeing the one line in the trailer is hilarious.
Yeah.
And my son plays HeroClix, and it's been bizarre to see. Like, I don't always know what's out there, So somebody all of a sudden one day showed me a Tiamat, and I was like, oh yeah, that's our Tiamat. Like, that's bizarre. And then the day there was a Blind Al HeroClix, I thought was insane.
I had no idea that existed. That is amazing.
Well, not only that, she's apparently so powerful, she's like booted from most competition. Like, she's an overpowered piece, apparently. But it's cool. It's really, I mean, I love that stuff, and I love it in the same way when I see fan art of Barbara, or from Michael Giants, or any of this stuff. It's when people, like we were saying before, when they start to make something their own, when they really feel so invested that they want to devote their talent, time, interest to something you made up. It's a really wonderful feeling. So yeah, Alan, and from what I've heard, having talked to Rob, who's seen plenty of the movie, he's like, you're gonna love Blind Al.
Yeah.
He just said, you are going to love her. And I was like, all right, bring it on. I'm very excited about that.
Yeah, it should be very entertaining. But so, Spider-Man, Deadpool. You said there were 3 things that Nick Lowe pitched you on, but I have to ask, like, how big of taking that job, or how much of taking that job was because you had the chance to work with Ed again?
Oh, it was a really big part. It was a really big part, honestly. It's for all the mercenary reasons, it made sense at this time, knowing the movie was coming out, blah blah blah. Like, it's also nice to put your toe back in mainstream and remind people you're alive. Like, all that stuff is true. But working with Ed and seeing how Ed has grown as an artist, like work he did on Nova, and it's just he's grown, and he's one of the first guys I ever worked with. So it's not just old home week. It's a fun, again, I'm a different writer, he's a different artist. Even though obviously same DNA, I mean, you're going to see the same types of things that I do what I do, he does what he does. We're just hopefully have gotten a little better at what we do. He's such a great guy. He's so earnest. He really, really loves what he does. And so he has a ton of ideas. There's all the other influences that we have in terms of characters that we love in the Marvel universe. Things that he wants to bring in, and he'll say something, and then that'll spur an idea from me, and he's very super collaborative. And I definitely put him through his paces as far as like, I know he prefers really open stuff, but a lot of the humor I do tends to take up room, and I make him work a little hard for it. But I know he can take it because
Yeah.
I've already been down that road. But he's great. I just love him to death. I've been really lucky. I mean, very, very lucky in my career in that almost all of my artist collaborations have been overwhelmingly positive. You
Mm-hmm.
know, uh, really, just I can't believe how lucky I've been. I mean, just maybe I just didn't do that much work, so I just had all the good ones. But it's just people that I would hang out with. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's not just a working thing. Even though I mostly hang out in my little cave on Long Island and never come out, there are people that if I had a social life, I would want to hang out with. And Ed is one of those guys. He's really great.
And I think that kind of ties into like maybe it ties into your ability to be a little bit more selective, because of your successes elsewhere. Like, maybe it gives you a better opportunity to choose artists that you really want to work with or you connect with or anything like that. Like it's I don't know. I mean, I think one of the interesting things about your career is like I'd never experienced Max Fumara's. If I'm pronouncing that wrong, I apologize.
Yeah.
His art before Four Eyes, and I was completely blown away. And it was like you introduced. Well, I mean, in a way, I picked it up because I liked your writing, and I was so blown away by his art. And same with Ken on I Kill Giants. Like I'd never seen his art anywhere, and
Right.
it was a style that I up until that point had never even like really seen. And it was great being able to be introduced to that because it seems like you kind of you could have probably taken both of those books a different direction as far as art was concerned, finding different collaborators, but they both fit the story, but also like I don't know. I mean, I guess I like being able to be introduced to a world through somebody who I'd never experienced before because they give me a new perspective that I wouldn't have expected otherwise.
Right. For sure. Yeah. And it's funny. It's less about that part is really less about like man of action success and more of the kindness of the comics industry. Like the fact that we've been able to, and again, I promise I'm never using the royal we with this. A lot of times when I go on a convention, it's a foreign convention, it'll be with Steve or Duncan or somebody. But we have been lucky enough, and mostly because of those first couple of years. Like I was in comics for a year, and then I got the X-Men,
Yeah,
and
it's not a
once
bad start. Not a bad start.
yeah, exactly. No, I graduated grad school, got married, and got the X-Men all within like a 2-week period. It was kind of insane, and that started the international convention thing.
Mm-hmm.
And once you're lucky enough to go to one of these places, you're kind of on their radar, and so that's where I meet people that nobody's seen before. And so I met Ken in Spain. Obviously, many years later, but
Mm-hmm.
I met Ken in Spain, and it was funny. He had just put out like his first book in Spain.
Yeah.
It was an anthology of stuff, but he had many different styles. He's a very super talented guy, and we happened to be sitting at a table together, and I was, hey, would you ever consider doing something in the States? And he was playing it all cool. I had no idea that he was a huge steampunk fan. He told me later. But he was, oh yeah, sure, whatever. He was very slick. But yeah, so I got to meet Ken, and that was just, what he brought to Giants. I mean, the bunny ears, Barbara's bunny ears are because of Ken.
Yeah.
She was originally modeled off of my daughter, who had at the time a lot of curly hair, and he was just like, if I draw in this manga style the way I do, it just looks like spaghetti. Like,
Yeah.
can we do something with the hair? And I said, yeah, sure. And he pitched that she wears hats and ears, and then the bunny ears, which became iconic. So, he brought so much of that. And then Max, I met in Buenos Aires, again, lucky enough to be invited to a beautiful corner of the world I'd never been. And met him and Sebastian, his twin brother.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing how many twin brothers there are, twins working in comics who are very talented.
Also in that area too, because I mean, I guess they're. I don't. Are Gabriel Ba and Fabio Moon, are they twins? Yeah, I guess they
Yep.
are. So
Yep.
that is kind of funny.
Yeah, it's amazing. But so, met them, and Max had worked for DC doing like Infinity Inc.
Yeah.
And they had done some stuff elsewhere too. And what happens a lot of times is those guys get told they should draw a certain way.
Oh yeah.
And so they're sort of chasing, and they're told, not by untrustworthy sources, but people who are trying to help them with their career. So it'll be like right now, everybody wants John Cassidy, so you get more of this kind of like photorealistic vibe, or everybody wants Jim Lee. And so they do that. So his Infinity Inc. work really looks nothing like what he does on Four Eyes and what he does now, just in his normal work. And I found that out because he sent me a Christmas card, and it was such a different style. And I said, "Is this how you normally draw?" And he said, "Oh yeah, this is what I prefer." I said, "Well, I got something for you if you want to do it." And that's how Four Eyes started. And it was just allowing it. That's sort of the beauty of the independent comic, is that you're not worrying about, am I staying on model for a character that people have a very strong opinion about. So, Duncan Rouleau, one of my partners in Man of Action, Duncan has this all the time. If people see his work on characters like the Metal Men, for example, that they may not be super emotionally invested in, or if they do, they're thinking nostalgia. It's not like they read Metal Men last week. They look at his Metal Men graphic novel and like, oh my God, you're an amazing artist. Or we did the Juggernaut one shot, and they're like, wow, this is really cool. Or they see his current work. Then you have him draw Superman, and they're like, oh, this is Superman. His nose is too big. And it's the same guy, but Duncan's style does not change to cater to the character. And a lot of people do.
Right.
So when they have freedom in an independent book, and you're just like, do what you do. That's all I want to see. I think it becomes more fun for them. And then for me, it's very, very exciting. I mean, then that's kind of when the magic, that creative magic kicks in, and you go, wow, this guy is just, I thought I wrote a cool script, and now I'm looking at really cool pages. And then you go, well, this book has to be amazing, and I've got to up my game. And so you get into that really fun collaboration / competition of, okay, who can outcool the other one, and it's great. And so, and same with Diego, I love these guys. And it's really been a gift of this industry to get to go places and meet people.
Yeah.
And then, give them a shot. I mean, I hope if that's when I kick myself for not being prolific enough, Joe Casey can write like 75 comics a year, and I'm just like lucky I can barely get out Four Eyes a year, which are coming out, by the way.
I was going to ask.
Yeah, Four Eyes, technically, I mean, it's the 5th issue, but it's a new arc, so it's Hearts of Fire #1 is coming out in January. So I'm very, very excited. And him and I have committed to just each sort of like, for lack of a better term, season of Four Eyes. It's just, they're 4-issue chunks. So, yeah, that's been solicited. It'll show up in the catalog. So that's coming out in January.
So, and it's Max back on the book, right?
Yeah, it's Max, and then we have, because his responsibilities on Abe Sapien were pretty dense, we do have a fellow helping out, Rafael Ortiz, he's in a similar wheelhouse to Max. It's it's obviously two different guys, but they share enough that I think the arc holds for sure. As a whole, and Max is doing the final kind of color treatment over all of them too. So, and we're doing everything now in that kind of like colored sepia / blue tones. The gray washes, like in the reprint of the trade we just did. So it's going to look beautiful.
I haven't actually looked at. I was a big fan of Four Eyes and I Killed Giants, but I bought them in single issues.
Oh, cool.
And I have to admit, it was weird reading them again after Four Eyes obviously hasn't been as long as I Killed Giants was, but it was interesting reading them collected and like had never having done that before. And I don't know, it was an interesting experience. But I have an old trade, so I don't have those washes in there. But I'm very excited for Four Eyes to come back. That was a really really great first arc. But so is it just the first issue of a second volume or of a like the second arc, or is it actually getting
Yeah.
a new number one?
Well, it's the new arc I mean, each arc is going to be 1 to 4.
Okay,
So
that makes
yeah,
sense.
so it's just a way to mostly because of the amount of time that's
Mhm.
gone in between, just to help give it a chance and just understanding how the market works. To put it, if issue 4 was out X amount of years ago, to go like here's issue 5 just kind of doesn't make sense to people.
Right.
And it is a new arc. It's a new story. So it's still Enrico and Four Eyes and what happens next. But it's that's just the way we're doing them.
Yeah, that makes
Yeah.
sense. It's actually kind of fitting because it's kind of how like the Mignola-verse always worked, and now Max is working over there quite a bit. It's actually I've been I actually just looked at his Infinity Ink art, and you can actually you can see him in there, but it's like definitely not his usual, well, like what I'm used to because I never experienced it before. But
Right.
it's good that he like I'm glad when artists like that find a home, like, and again, not to say that DC was making him do something he didn't want, but good to find a home that where he can be himself with his art, because he's such a good fit for Abe Sapien too.
Oh yeah, he's incredible, and so is Sebastian, and
Yeah.
they, yeah, it's not even. I mean, I wasn't really privy to what was going on with him at DC. It was off my radar, and I don't think that he was being like you said. I don't think anybody was telling him to do something. I think that's how he got in.
Yeah.
So you get in showing one kind of style, and then it's tough to shift gears because that's sort of what you were hired to do, and that kind of thing. So. And then it was great to, partly to my detriment, but for Max, I'm glad we did it, to get him on Spider-Man and to be able to, at the time talk to Steve Wacker and say, this is what Max does. Like, if you like this, he will do this on Spider-Man and it's going to be incredible. And then to let him do that, that's the hallmark of again, I've been lucky with editors too.
Yeah.
Hallmark of a good editor, like Wacker is just so good at that. And so that Rhino story that we wound up doing, I mean, that thing is beautiful. I mean, that I have a couple of pages of that, and I love seeing those pages because, watching Max then in a mainstream universe do Spider-Man, do the Rhino, like bring that same level of gravitas is so cool. And obviously it works so well on the Dark Horse stuff.
Yeah, it was actually the whole Brand New Day stuff that you worked on. I don't even. I guess it was still technically Brand New Day when you were working on it.
Yeah.
I really liked that whole period for Spider-Man was really cool because it was like you and people like Max or like Chris Bachalo or and like and Zeb Wells and stuff. And it was cool seeing all the different rotating voices, both artistically and in writing, like approach the character, because you got to see cool stories like the Rhino story you did, and like Grim Hunt, and like there was this one story where God, I forgot what it was called. I think it was Fred Van Lente or Fred Van Lent, and it was like Kemia's Castle. Did you ever read that?
I probably did.
It was like a Sandman story. It was like he like actually like abducted his daughter and he built a castle for her to live in. And I don't know. It was an interesting time for the character. You don't really see stuff like that very often for like that kind of experimentation in an odd way. But anyways, that's a random aside. But
it was a great time. I was very lucky to be in that room at that time. Honestly, it was very smart people. It was, and for better or for worse of the Brand New Day of it all, it had already been a year.
Yeah.
So I was not in the door when all of the like insanity hate mails like that had subsided, but we still had the new status quo to play with. So I got to have all the love and none of the anger. But Joe Q is actually really easy to work with. He's great in a room. I mean, we've worked with him. I've worked with him now both in comics and in animation. I love talking to him, and he's really thoughtful about why he makes certain decisions, which is always, I'll take specificity over just do something cool like anything. So he was great. And then, like you said, everybody in that room, Brevoort I've known for a very long time. He's great. Wacker I love. Mark Guggenheim, Bob Gale, Zeb Wells, it was such a cool group of people. And Slott. And, Slott is like, he's the greatest comics cheerleader of all time. Like, he is his energy level is so high that if you have a shred of like dourness about like, oh, I had to go to work today, it's obliterated by this man, because he's so in love with the universe and comics and superheroes. And so I found it infectious. It was a really good time to be there. And then, like I said, we had just an incredible art team. It was so cool.
Yeah.
And Phil Jimenez, was sort of in a tail end to some of that and had built a lot of the architecture for Grim Hunt. And him and I have been friends for decades. And, it was a great time. It was really, I would have stayed there a lot longer. I love, it was a good time.
Well, especially considering the fact you're a Spider-Man fan.
Yeah. Oh, it was. I could not have asked for a better time to be there and to play in that pool. It was cool.
So the last thing I wanted to bring up was, and you were talking about like kind of your creative relationships with everybody and like how you worked with Ken and Max and everything. I just have to give you a shout out, and you actually, and Ken in specific. I love like the backup comics that you guys had for like the creative process for I Kill Giants. I'm just throwing this out there. I'm guessing those aren't accurate.
Well, they're all Ken. That I'll tell you that. He said, "Hey, we have this extra page. Do you care if I do this little comic strip?" And I was like, "Yeah, no problem." And they were so funny to get. And yes, I don't know. I can't speak for Ken. But I loved how every time he drew my kids just being ignored. That really made me laugh. But it was working with, again, like I said, I've been so lucky with these guys, and Ken's like a super genius. Like speaks 4 languages, and his dad's Japanese, and his mom's from Spain, and he currently lives in Tokyo doing manga, and he's amazing. He's amazing, and he can do anything. And those cartoons are really fun. I don't think that he's so self-effacing in his art, like his personal stuff. I don't know if you saw his Henshin.
I didn't.
There's some autobiographical parts in it, and he just beats himself up all the time, and it's so funny. Every panel I got from him, I was just like, oh my God, he's so good. I don't even understand how he's doing it, because what's so cool about him is his line looks very loose. Mm-hmm. It's very relaxed, but if you've ever seen the Titan edition, all the design work that goes into what he does, like he designed Barbara's whole house, he designed the school, he had everything like worked out meticulously. So by the time he gets to those pages, he can afford to be loose because he knows exactly how it's going to be. It's really amazing. He's quite a technician, and it's hidden behind relaxed line.
Yeah, I don't have the Titan edition, but that is cool. It's like he's like setting up the architecture so he can have like some freedom once he actually gets in there. And like, I don't know, I love how like self-effacing and just self-deprecating the whole the comics are in the back, where and also like the idea that there's apparently 7 of him. And they're all wearing rabbit costumes and doing different roles. I guess that would make him a lot more efficient as an artist if there was 7 of him.
It was incredible. Well, he did. I mean, he literally did everything on that book. And then every time we would get a chance to do a new edition, Ken, like, this is just an example of how smart he is. Ken actually drew every page of I Kill Giants in European format and then cropped it for the American format because he knew eventually it would be in European format and it's easier to
reduce rather than move up.
Yes, exactly. And so when all of a sudden we were ready to do something in France or whatever, he was like, "Oh yeah, it's already done." What? and he could do the translations, and he could do all. So yeah, there it is. Like there's 7 of him. That might be accurate.
He's a Renaissance man with bunny ears on.
Yes, exactly. No, he really he's great, and that was he's such a sweet guy, and we don't get to see each other very often, but when we do, it's always a pleasure. I mean, he's really cool. Like I said, I've been so damn lucky with these people, and we've been talking about doing another project, and my biggest I'm my own worst enemy really when it comes to this stuff, because I'll either go down rabbit holes and sort of chase projects that aren't quite there, or I'm just extremely busy with Man of Action stuff, which is all positive. That's not a complaint.
Right.
But so to carve out the time to do a comic, it can be challenging sometimes for me. And but recently we settled on something, and it's just a matter of sitting down. He wanted to try something that's different for him, and so we kind of have some half-baked idea that eventually I'll write for him. But we're like, we cannot let a movie come out and not have another book. That would just be really stupid. So there will be more. There will be more with Ken in the future. As soon as I can multiply myself into Seth Joe Kelly's.
You just need to ask him how he did it.
Yes, partly he did it because he's 10 years younger than me.
Oh yeah.
So that helped. But and doesn't have all the family stuff going on. He's just this single international jet setter,
speaking 4 languages and just being a Renaissance man of his own making.
Yeah, it's incredible. I hate him.
It came through in the backup comics.
Yes. Yeah. So now the truth really comes out. See, if you get me long enough, the truth is I did abuse him. I completely. All those comics are accurate.
Well, it was a pleasure talking to you, Joe. I really appreciate it, and I'm looking forward to Spider-Man, Deadpool, and Four Eyes, and whatever you guys end up doing with you and Ken end up doing.
Well, thank you so much. This is absolutely a pleasure too. I really appreciate your taking the time. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks, man.
Sure. Thanks.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Off Panel from Sketch.com. You can find this week's guest, Joe Kelly, on Twitter at @JoeKellyMOA, and in upcoming comics like Spider-Man, Deadpool at Marvel, and the second volume of Four Eyes at Image. You can find more sketch content at Sketched, that's SKTCHD.com. Follow us on Twitter at @SketchComic, and like us on Facebook at /Sketched. Thanks for listening, and tune in next week for another episode.